I think we all have to remember that when George Bush entered the White House in February 2001, his top priority was not terrorism or national security, as it has become since then. His top priority in entering the White House was energy. The very first thing he did was to create a national energy policy working group headed by Vice President Cheney to address the nation's energy security. This was brought about because there was an energy crisis at the time. There were blackouts in California. There were oil shortages around the United States. And more important, just a year earlier, the United States had passed the 50% mark of dependence on imported petroleum for the first time. And this was deeply distressing to American policymakers because it meant that from now on, as America continues to consume more petroleum than it produces, that will become ever more dependent on imported petroleum. And so it was this issue more than any other that preoccupied the president and the cabinet in their first few months in office. And Vice President Cheney conducted a study, produced a report, the National Energy Policy Report, on May 17, 2001, which was a blueprint for the nation in terms of its energy. And much of this is known. He called for drilling on ANWR, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and a lot of subsidies to domestic oil and coal and nuclear and electricity producers to ramp up, beef up the domestic energy policy. The part that's not well known about the NEP, the National Energy Policy, is that the plan also calls for a substantial increase in U.S. involvement, political and otherwise, in foreign areas that the U.S. is becoming increasingly dependent upon. And the plan calls for increased oil procurement from the Persian Gulf area, from the Caspian Sea, from Africa and Latin America. And because those areas were assumed to pose resistance of one sort or another to American involvement in their oil, either for nationalistic reasons or political reasons, historical reasons, or the fact that many of those areas harbor anti-American sentiments, it was understood that the U.S. would have to play a much more aggressive, assertive role in gaining access to the rest of the world's oil. And this was the backdrop for September 11th, 2001. During the entire summer of that year, right up to September 11th, President Bush was campaigning for implementation of the national energy policy. That was what was in the forefront of his mind. And I think that you could see that in the invasion of Iraq as a consequence of this, but many other things also can be seen in this. The aggressive U.S. intervention, insertion into the Caspian Sea basin, with bases being set up in Uzbekistan, in Kyrgyzstan, in Tajikistan, American troops being sent to Georgia, talk of building bases in Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, building up a naval presence in the Persian Gulf area. All of this shows how the pursuit of energy became intertwined with the strategy of anti-terrorism. Those two policies have become one and the same under Bush. And I think that from now on, you will not be able to separate them. Wherever the U.S. is interested in oil, there's an anti-terrorist component to that.